everybody for joining us this afternoon. My name is Austin Estes, and I'm with Advanced CTE. Today we're going to cover how states can leverage ESSA's momentum to advance career readiness. When ESSA was passed in 2015, it was celebrated for expanding flexibility to states and providing a system of education that meets the needs of families, students, and community members in each state. Now that all state plans have been submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, this is a critical opportunity to take a step back, reflect on the progress that states have made over the past couple years, and begin to chart a path forward. Today on our webinar, we're going to learn how states are leveraging ESSA to support statewide strategies for career readiness. We're going to hear from 2 states that are working to integrate career readiness in their ESSA implementation plans, and we're going to identify opportunities to sustain momentum around career readiness through ESSA implementation. Before we get started, I have a couple quick housekeeping notes to go over. First of all audience members have been muted for the duration of the webinar. If you do have any questions you would like to ask any of the panelists, please submit those questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Additionally, slides and a recording of the webinar will be made available at the conclusion of today's session. We have an esteemed group of panelists on today's webinar, so I'll just take a quick minute to introduce each one of them. We're joined by Reyna, a Senior Associate with Education Strategy Group, who's a thought leader on career readiness accountability in ESSA. He's a co-author of our report, Mapping Career Readiness in ESSA, and has also served as a reviewer with the Collaboration of Student Success. My name is Austin Estes. I'm a Policy Associate with Advanced CTE. We're also joined by Laura Scheibe, who's the Director of CTE at the South Dakota Department of Education, who, before assuming her role, helps develop and write South Dakota's ESSA state plan. And we're also joined by Steve Osborne, the Chief of Accelerating School Performance at the Rhode Island Department of Education, who has also been involved in the state's ESSA plan development and is a team leader for Rhode Island's New Skills for Youth team. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan to share a little bit about some top-line takeaways from ESSA plan development.
Thanks, Austin, and I want to thank Advanced CTE for the partnership that we've had with them to focus on this issue, and thank all of you for participating in this call as well. I just want to spend a minute giving some initial thoughts and framing around ESSA generally in the plans, given that I've had the pleasure and at times pain of reading every single state plan, and so I wanted to share that as some framing context for the conversation today. As you guys know, ESSA at the end of the day is about state and district leadership, and a lot has been written about what was required in the law and whether or not there were too many holes left open for states and whether the department would actually enforce the letter of the law, et cetera. But for all the focus on what would or would not be approved, I don't think we've spent enough time really appreciating the genuine conversations that went into the development of these plans. In my conversations with my former state colleagues, every single one of them has said that this has been the most significant stakeholder engagement process they've ever done on the direction of the K-12 system, and I think states should be celebrated for that for sure. Now, obviously, the challenge is that states took very different approaches in their plans that Austin will lay out. And kind of some saw ESSA as an opportunity to lay out a very detailed strategy. Others saw the plan merely as a document to sort of answer questions that was posed by the federal government. It's really going to come down to how this all plays out in implementation, and I think you guys know that is a big challenge in front of you. As I read across all 51 state plans, I thought it was really important to call out the fact that to every single plan, college and career readiness was the sort of leading North Star. Every state was focused on providing more pathways from high school into post-secondary education and training, and that's a really important shift and one in which we haven't seen previously in the run-up to NCLB necessarily. However, that did not always translate, from my perspective, into a clear alignment between aspirations the long-term goals that states were setting, and then ultimately the indicators in the state system. And Austin's going to spend a minute talking about that as well. I do think we have some really good examples of how that can be achieved, and Rhode Island and South Dakota are two of the states that we think have done the best work on that. At the end of the day, it's really important that we're creating systems that value what we care most about, and that means holding high schools accountable ultimately for preparing students for college and careers, and expecting that that performance will be higher than what ultimately we need based on our kind of projections around what the long-term post-secondary attainment rates need to be in this country. On that same note, I noticed and was pleased by the fact that plans across states were about more than just what happens in K-12. The plans that I found to be most compelling were the ones that made explicit connections to early childhood, to post-secondary, to workforce, recognizing that the success of the K-12 system really doesn't occur in a vacuum. And there was a lot of good work to reach out to those sectors to make sure that this was really about the education system as a whole and not just the K-12 system. And we really just need to continue to focus on bringing those partners into making the ideas a reality. As I mentioned, implementation matters. At the end of the day, these ESSA plans are just that, they're plans. They only really become real when states start to implement the ideas contained in them. And as you guys all know, the work is just getting started in that perspective. In many ways, the hardest part is what's in front of you. That is to identify the business rules that are going to make up your metrics, to start new data collections, to provide professional development to teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also critical to remember that things change through this process, and the plans cannot and should not be static. State leaders, at the end of the day, are committed to continuous improvement, and so they need to make that a reality, which means keeping the stakeholder engagement going, keeping accountability work groups going. And I will leave this conversation just as a reminder that more so than I've seen in the past, people are watching what's in these plans and what states are doing to actually implement them. It's a lot more than what we've seen under NCLB, and ESSA sort of presents a natural experiment to see whether or not certain decisions that states made around the metrics or the way in which they're calculating accountability ultimately result in different changes. And I think you will see a lot more written and discussed about over the next few years around whether states are, quote unquote, sticking to their plans, or how certain strategies or detail about their strategies may be connected to performance. So I'm looking forward to seeing that action happen over the next few years, and I'm especially interested in where states are taking advantage of opportunities under this law to really push forward on career readiness. With that, I'm going to turn back to Austin and encourage you guys to continue to work hard to make these plans a reality.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. So about a month ago, Advanced CTE worked with Education Strategy Group and with Ryan and his team to release an update to our report, Mapping Career Readiness and ESSA State Plans. And that report looked across all 50 states and Washington, D.C. to see how states are integrating career readiness into their implementation plans. And we looked at a couple key opportunities that we're going to describe in detail today. The most direct opportunity states have to connect ESSA with their career readiness strategies is through their accountability systems. Under ESSA, states are required to develop an accountability system that includes at least 5 indicators, one of which must be a state-identified measure of school quality or student success. Now, this is an area where we saw a lot of activity from states. Across all 51 state plans, we identified 35 states that are measuring career readiness through their high school accountability systems. And some of the common measures that we read through include work-based learning, industry credential attainment, and CTE pathway completion. We also saw that of the states that did not specify new measures of career readiness in their plans, there were a number that are considering to adopt new indicators in the future or will plan to report career readiness measures publicly. There were 4 that fall into the first category that are considering new indicators to adopt at a future date, and there are 3 that described plans to report career readiness measures publicly. And we should also add that we only looked at what was included specifically in state plans, and we do know that there are other states that are planning to adopt career readiness measures shortly. So this number will likely increase in the next couple of years. Under ESSA, states must use their accountability systems to identify low-performing schools and districts and provide comprehensive or targeted support to help those schools improve. TSI and CSI schools and districts must complete a local needs assessment and are eligible to receive additional funding and supports. This is a critical opportunity for states to elevate the role of career preparation in turning around low-performing schools. In the first review of the 17 plans that were submitted in April of last year, we didn't find any that described plans to use targeted or comprehensive supports to advance career readiness. But in the second round, there were 5 states that identified CTE and career pathways as specific supports for schools that are identified for comprehensive or targeted support and improvement. This includes Ohio, which plans to encourage low-performing high schools to implement CTE as part of their school improvement plans. Of course, it's exciting to see that there are 5 states that are making moves in this area, but there's a clear opportunity here for states moving forward to take advantage of the needs assessment through TSI, CSI, and through the supports to continue to drive the momentum around career readiness. Another area where ESSA can be leveraged is through the Direct Student Services Allowance under Title I. Through ESSA, states can set aside up to 3% of the funds that are designated for local grants to provide direct student services specifically for students in low-performing schools. And those funds can be used to cover enrollment costs in advanced coursework, including career technical education, international baccalaureate, advanced placement, dual enrollment, and more. Across all 51 state plans, we only identified 2 states, Louisiana and New Mexico, that are taking advantage of this opportunity. Another leverage point in ESSA is through Title II Part A, the Supporting Effective Instruction Grants. This is a program that provides grants to local education agencies to provide professional development and training for teachers, leaders, and administrators. Under ESSA, the allowable uses of funds is expanded, and states can use Title II Part A to train teachers, leaders, and administrators on strategies to integrate academic and technical instruction, as well as using labor market data in the classroom. But despite this opportunity, we only counted 11 states that described specific strategies to strengthen career readiness through teacher development, and further, only 7 states that specified that Title II funds would be used for this purpose. This is a clear area where states have a lot of leeway in the future, and local education agencies have a lot of leeway to use this grant opportunity to drive career readiness. New under ESSA is the Title IV Part A, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants. These grants were created by consolidating a number of other categorical programs under No Child Left Behind. And states are required to spend 95% of these funds locally to support 3 specific activities: improving school learning conditions, providing for the effective use of technology, and expanding access to a well-rounded education, which by definition under ESSA now includes career technical education. Overall, we counted 36 states that reinforce the idea that a well-rounded education should include and that federal funds should be used to support CTE and career readiness, which is a pretty remarkable number. However, only 15 states committed to using their Title IV funds to strengthen career readiness strategies, either through the state set-aside or by requiring local education agencies to use funds for this purpose. And finally, states can leverage the 21st Century Community Learning Center Grant Program, which is another initiative under Title IV, to support career preparation activities in after-school programs. This grant provides funding for after-school programs that supplement a well-rounded education. In total, we counted 20 states that plan to use this funding opportunity to prioritize career exploration, development, and preparation in after-school programs. And I have one example here from Pennsylvania, which includes 5 priorities for the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant program: supporting STEM and STEAM education, supporting workforce, career, and college readiness, planning for transitional, vocational, and technical services, high school credit recovery, and supporting underserved geographic locations. So in short, ESSA marks a significant shift, as Ryan was talking about before, in how states are leveraging federal policy to strengthen career readiness. And we were particularly excited to see how many states are integrating measures of career preparation into their federal accountability systems. However, states left many opportunities on the table, and few states described plans to fully leverage ESSA to maximize career preparation. Now that all state plans have been submitted to the Department of Education, and many of them have been finalized, just yesterday the Department of Education announced 11 more states that have been finalized. It's now up to state and local leaders to go beyond the letter of their plans and use ESSA's momentum to sustain support for career readiness. And on that note, I'd like to hand it over to Laura Scheibe from South Dakota to describe how her state plans to strengthen career readiness through ESSA. Laura?
Thank you very much. And I'm pleased that of the fortuitous timing of this webinar in particular, as because South Dakota was one of the plans that was approved last night. So I'm happy to say that what I'll be presenting has been approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So South Dakota has had the aspiration since about 2012 that all students will be college, career, and life ready. And this has guided our work in the past 5 years. But when it comes to accountability, it's really stood apart from how we've approached accountability. South Dakota was one of the flexibility waiver states from No Child Left Behind, so we largely followed what was required of us by the feds in order to get that flexibility waiver. But ESSA really presented us with an opportunity to take a look philosophically at how we were approaching accountability and make sure that all actors were at the table. So ESSA gave CTE a chance to be at the table for those accountability discussions and be a part of a broad departmental effort to really think about how are we approaching accountability and how are we making it as our own rather than just something imposed upon us by the U.S. Department of Education. And so our philosophical change really begins with this graphic that is how we have displayed how we want to be college, career, and life ready, which, as I said, has been a part of our aspiration work for the past 5 years. We start off our ESSA plan with this to signal that this is really South Dakota's plan, this is what we are about, and accountability, our ESSA plan, is a tool to get us there. That accountability no longer stands on its own on its side as something that we have to do. It's really integrating our efforts. And so we do that through our state plan in a number of different ways. And I wanted to display how we have allocated the points at the high school level as a means of demonstrating our commitment to college and career readiness. As Austin explained, states are required to have a school quality or student success indicator. It's also called the non-academic indicator. And originally, South Dakota's college and career readiness indicator fell into that category. But when it came time to put together our plan, we decided that that didn't really match our vision. That wasn't where we wanted to head, and that wasn't the message that we wanted to be sending out to schools and districts and our stakeholders. The college and career readiness was separate from other indicators such as student achievement or our graduation rates. And so we decided to redesign how we're doing our high school points, and we moved college and career readiness to be an academic indicator at a full 25 points out of our 100 to really begin signaling that college and career readiness is not separate from academics. College and career readiness isn't separate from core content. It's an integral part of the high school experience, and it's an integral part of what we need to be holding our school districts accountable for. And so we set out right from the start by signaling how important college and career readiness is to us in the state. When we get into the details of our indicator, this was one of the discussions that took significant amount of time during our stakeholder consultations. And again, it really was about that philosophy of how are we approaching college and career readiness. Similar to many states, in the past, we measured career readiness simply through attainment on the National Career Readiness Certificate, or NCRC. And we had set it at the bronze level, and that was really the only way we had to demonstrate for students to demonstrate whether or not they were career ready. And we really only folded this in within the last 2 years. And so when it came time to evaluate our ESSA plan, there was broad consensus that there wasn't a sufficient means of students being able to demonstrate that they were ready for what comes next. In our previous system, we also had silos between college readiness and career readiness. Schools could earn points for students being college ready, or they could earn points for students being career ready. But when we thought about our aspiration goals, back to that all students college, career, and life ready, we realized that we weren't really asking whether kids are college or career ready, that really it was about a change of kids need to be both, that there shouldn't be those barriers, there shouldn't be those silos between college and career readiness. We want kids to be both. Just because a student is going on to a university doesn't mean that we still don't have the necessity of preparing that student to be career ready. And so when we looked at how to design this indicator, we wanted to make certain that we folded in more measures of students being able to demonstrate that they are prepared for what comes next. And so we eliminated those silos between college and career readiness. You'll see the bolded points here are ways that incorporate CTE coursework or career readiness. We still maintain the National Career Readiness Certificate, but that's on a par with our state summative assessment, the Smarter Balanced. So a student can demonstrate that they're ready through assessments, with Smarter Balanced and the NCRC being on an equal footing. And then we look at course-taking patterns. And this is done through CTE concentrators, dual credit courses, which in South Dakota you can earn dual credit both at our Board of Regents system as well as our technical institutes. So those CTE post-secondary courses can count towards our progress towards post-high school credential or course-taking patterns. And finally, 2 CTE foundational courses or capstone experiences. Again, this is a way for students to be able to demonstrate that they are career ready. So we are folding this in, and we also understand that this isn't the end of the conversation, but rather it's a starting point. We don't view our ESSA state plan as a fixed point in time. We're going to, now that we have approval, put it on a shelf and move onwards. We view it as a living document, and these give us a good building block in order to move forward with our college and career readiness plans. Career readiness goes just beyond the college and career readiness indicator, however, and this is where it was valuable for us as the CTE division to be able to be at the table in some of those conversations surrounding accountability. One of the biggest ways is for CTE program supports for schools in school improvement. And again, Austin touched on this, that we know that students who are involved in CTE coursework experience better outcomes. We know they have better graduation rates. And so it only makes sense that CTE be at the table during these conversations about how to help schools that are designated for school improvement. And so for the first time, the CTE division is being integrated in with our title team to be able to have those conversations with schools. And in particular, we've flagged that for schools designated for school improvement with low graduation rates, that CTE must be part of that conversation. Again, because we see that as an easy win. We look at the character of our schools and school improvements, we look at what CTE can offer, and it's a natural fit. We've also designated that CTE program improvement can be part of Title IV Part A funds, as well as the comprehensive needs assessment. If it's going to be a comprehensive needs assessment, then it only makes sense for a school to be looking at all of its components, not just those core content areas, but CTE needs to be at the table as well, because again, we know of the tremendous benefits that schools and students can have with a robust CTE program. Looking at CTE programs must be part of that comprehensive needs assessment, and I'm glad that we're at the table to be able to facilitate those conversations and have CTE program improvement be a part of that process. But career readiness really goes beyond ESSA, and the ESSA state plan came at a fortuitous time for us to be able to support what the momentum in the entire state has been. We started our ESSA work about 1.5 years ago, and in the last year there's been tremendous momentum towards career readiness. Our governor is in the last year of his 8-year administration. He has made workforce readiness a signature part of his final year in office. He is also the chairman of the Western Governors Association and has made that his signature issue. He also is on President Trump's apprenticeship task force. And so we have significant conversations in the state going on right now about workforce readiness. ESSA helped us lay the groundwork for those conversations being multidimensional. And so part of what we've got going on beyond ESSA is for a program called Workforce Education Grants. This is funding set aside that's established by the legislature to be able to support CTE programs looking at innovative ways to improve. So beyond just the Perkins allocation, we have a competitive grant allocation twice yearly that we look at funding innovative programs. What are schools doing differently? How are they looking at ways of advancing the readiness of their students through their CTE programs? And we provide additional supports for them to do that. There's also a lot of conversations in the state going on right now about graduation requirements. And again, ESSA helps fit into this, and our workforce readiness plans fit into this as well. Traditionally, we have had a college readiness diploma. We've had one diploma, but we know that that doesn't always fit in with where we're going, and it doesn't always fit in with where students are. And so how do we recognize CTE coursework? How do we recognize career readiness in that high school diploma process? The groundwork that we laid in preparing our ESSA plan has helped us advance that conversation. We also just recently launched a program called Career Launch to provide what I'm calling surge support for our school districts in advancing career advising as well as CTE programs. We know school district personnel are taxed with the amount of time that they have to spend with students on that career advising piece. So we as a state are stepping in 4 pilot school districts to provide some of that support, to find out what our best practices, how do we make this work, how do we give school districts the resources to be able to fulfill that critical part of the middle school and high school experience. And finally, as I've mentioned, ESSA has allowed us to start the greater departmental collaboration around career readiness, around CTE programs, so that CTE doesn't sit aside from the rest of the work of the department, but that we're really at the table as part of the conversation. And part of that has included aligning our data systems, having conversations with our assessment team, and talks about putting Perkins reporting in with our accountability report card so that, again, CTE doesn't sit apart, but it's part of it. So we're really grateful that ESSA came at the time it did. It allowed us to jumpstart some of these conversations that have put the state in a good position in order to be able to continue the momentum that we're experiencing right now around career readiness.
Great. Thank you, Laura, for sharing. And it's great to hear about all of the exciting work that you have going on in South Dakota. I think it's a great example of how states can go beyond the letter of their ESSA state plans and chart out a plan for career readiness statewide. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Steve Osborne from Rhode Island to share a little bit about his work. Steve?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Steve Osborne from Team Rhode Island here to join you today. First, it's really exciting to be able to share the story of the work that we're leading here in Rhode Island, and really interested to hear kind of thoughts, feedback, and then, as we run into folks in different places, areas that we can improve. The Rhode Island story is one that's not terribly different than I think a lot of other states. Over the last couple of years, folks have really gotten keyed in on the importance of career education. I think we've all seen the ebbs and flows that have taken place in kind of education policy circles. And I think for the first time in a while, folks are really understanding the need to be able to make sure that our students truly graduate high school ready for success at the next level. In Rhode Island, we've really tried to bring the story to life by sharing some data and statistics. The first two that we very commonly share out is next year, 70% of the jobs in Rhode Island are going to require some form of post-secondary experience. That is not just an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. Those are industry-recognized credentials, and that is where the jobs are in Rhode Island. The second piece, which again, I'm sure everyone on this call is heard 100,000 times, but it is amazing to me when we go out and we share it with our school and district leaders, teachers, parents, Most folks haven't heard this statistic, and it's really powerful, but we all know that 99% of the jobs created in the last 10 years require some form of post-secondary credential or value. When you share that information with folks, it really helps them connect and understand why this work is important. We're not talking about what it was like for us or for our parents or our parents' generation. This is very much a real issue for our children, that being able to graduate high school is not going to ensure next level success. Two, that another set of statistics that we share a little less commonly, and I would really encourage folks to look into this in their own respective state. The first one is we had heard other folks share this statistic, and we looked it up ourselves. And a graduate in Rhode Island who does not go on to college, the year after they graduate high school roughly earns about $8,000 a year. That is not a lot of money. And when you share that statistic with parents, teachers, school and district leaders, it's really powerful, where folks really believe that they're doing a great job getting kids across the finish line and graduating high school. But folks don't really have a realization of how ready their children are for success. And so in a lot of times in conversations, we'll say, well, I believe last year for us, it was 37% of kids went into the workforce after high school, and about 62 or 63% went on to some form of post-secondary. And so a lot of folks tend to say, well, you know, that's just the 37%. We don't need to do career readiness for the other 62 or 63%. And we looked into that as well, and it was really amazing. And I would encourage folks to do this, is to tie out how public high school students are doing at your public colleges and universities. We looked at it for our system, and let's just say they're not great numbers. And specifically when you look at it for 2-year graduation rates at the community college and 4-year at the bachelor level, which I know is different than the typical 6-year rates that folks look at. But if we want to have a conversation about students being able to support themselves and the need to work after high school, if you're going to take 6 years to get a bachelor's degree or 4 years to get an associate's degree, you're going to need to work to support yourself. And so being able to make those statistics come to life and make them real for folks, I think has been very powerful. Our core beliefs on this work is that career preparation is not something that should begin your senior year of high school or begin when you need to get a job. It's something that should start when a child is young in elementary school. Again, it should not look the same in high school as it does in elementary school, but we need to have programming. We need to have resources for teachers to be able to help pull in career education and awareness into all grade levels. So our students, once they get to middle school and high school and have the ability to take a great IT or computer programming course, that they know that that's something that they're interested in, that they're passionate about, and that they can do. The second belief that we have that, again, the first time we shared this for a lot of our folks, it took them by surprise, but we believe that the goal of education is not more education. So the goal of high school is not just to get into college. The goal of education, ultimately, wherever you end your education, is to be able to get a job. College is a pathway to a job. And so really trying to stress that the goal of the work that we're leading is for folks to get jobs, which, again, I think has folks have a very different set of solutions on how you prepare students in high school. We, as Austin mentioned, are one of the 10 new skills for youth states. And in our new skills for youth plan, which we submitted before our ESSA plan, we set some really big goals for our students in terms of our career readiness work. The first one is, again, knowing that 99% of jobs are going to require some form of post-secondary credential, is we wanted to reset the expectation of what it means to be a high school graduate in Rhode Island. Again, if we know that having just a diploma does not ensure the ability for a child to have a family-sustaining job after graduation, is we should reset the expectation and put the expectation that every child should graduate high school with a post-secondary credential of value. Realize that that is a big goal. It is going to be very difficult work, but if we want to make sure that all of our students, whether they be from poverty, whether they be language learners, whether they have IEPs, we need to set a bold, ambitious goal and then figure out how do we develop systems, structures, and supports to be able to help get them to that goal. The second one, which we really developed out of conversations with stakeholders and a lot of our employer community, was to set the expectation that every high school graduate should graduate high school with some form of work-based learning. I think, like many folks in this call, we've probably heard a lot about the need for our children to have better soft skills. For folks who work in K-12 education, there's nothing more frustrating than hearing that critique of our children. So when we did a needs assessment of kind of where we were as a state and the work we needed to do to instill confidence from the employer community in our system, is we wanted to make sure that our kids had experience in workplace settings before they graduated high school. And again, learned what it was like to have people rely on them, to count on them, things like that. And so we've set that expectation. Again, a lot of work to be done there, but something that we feel is if we want our children to be successful, they need to graduate high school having had some form of work-based learning. So for ESSA came along, and we were one of the states that applied in the second batch. We unfortunately had not yet been approved. So as I talk through this, there are some things that we are currently going back and forth with on the department. But I wish we were in the place that South Dakota is, where we can say we have gotten approved and we're good to go. But so as we talk through this, I'll kind of highlight areas that we've gotten some feedback on. I think we are trying to actively work through the department on some of the newer, more innovative ideas that we have. So the opportunity for us was to, one, really confirm our commitment to career education to all of our K through 12 leaders. We've done a lot of work in the career education space, but I think a lot of folks who are in the very traditional space don't kind of view it as a phase and a fad, and probably expected it to pass as it had in prior attempts to pull career education into schools. And so we felt it was really important to make sure that ESSA focused heavily on the career education efforts that we were leading at the state level right now. Second, we really wanted to make sure we remove the stigma related to career education. Again, with under NCLB in Rhode Island, for example, there was never any type of conversation about weighting or valuing any type of career education outcome for children. Additionally, in Rhode Island, we have a legacy of we have 10 state designated regional CTE centers. And so in many of our schools and many of our communities, CTE was very much viewed as something that the kids who left the high school and went somewhere else, that's what you did in CTE. It was not viewed as something that was for children who are college bound. So we really felt it was important to prioritize it in ESSA and leverage that opportunity to talk about how good high quality career education is actually probably the best way to get a child a scholarship to college and be able to get a child passionate about what they're going to be learning in college. We want to, again, have emphasized, and as we talk through our accountability portion of the presentation, is communicate that career readiness outcomes are just as important as college readiness outcomes. We are not, as a state, going to make a value statement over which one is more important. It's ultimately a decision of the child and their family on which is the most important for their path and their future. And then the fourth piece that really gave us a lot of opportunity with ESSA and being able to align the two efforts is how do we take and align our financial resources to support the expansion of high-quality career education. So that was very much the opportunity that we had, and what we'll do is kind of walk through some of the different areas that we've worked on and focused on. The first one, much like South Dakota and a handful of other states, is we incorporated career readiness measures into high school accountability. The way that we tackled it is a little bit different than I've seen folks tackle school accountability in previous efforts. We decided not to do an index-based system, but what we did is essentially we have a star system of 1 through 5 stars, and essentially what will be the different qualifications of like a 5-star school. So right now in Rhode Island, roughly 34% of our students graduate high school with some form of post-secondary credential. We got a lot of work we need to do to get to that 100% number, but what would those numbers look like in a 5-star school? And make sure that we align that and really have conversations with educators about what the work that needs to be done to be able to help support their students, whether they are intending to enroll in a 2-year or 4-year college or if they want to go work after high school. And the expectation is every child should have some type of post-secondary credential value by 2025. As I mentioned before, and again, this has been really big in shifting the conversation in our schools, and I think it's been really uplifting and empowering for educators, this year is the first year that any measure other than 9th and 10th grade assessments and graduation rate is going to be used in evaluating in high school. I think for anyone who's done work at the high school level, you do not see the returns on your investment in the gains in 9th or 10th grade. And then for many of our children, too, the true work and where the amazing teaching and the amazing learning happens in our high school is in the development of pathway programs. And so it's, a child being able to work with a teacher who helps them develop a senior project and be able to get college credit for that, or it's the child who's able to spend 3 years with a great construction teacher and graduate high school with a level 4 NCCR credential, things like that. And so schools have really been uplifted and empowered by this. We've also done a lot of work in Rhode Island too around course access that has helped schools and districts that may not be able to offer many, whether it be high quality career education or other types of college prep courses locally, as we have central structures that we are funding and paying for kids to go take courses in other schools and districts for public or private colleges in Rhode Island to be able to make sure that every school is ultimately able to meet these goals. So the second area that we spent and actually tackled pretty early on in the ESSA process was aligning our 21st century learning community funding. We did an RFP last year, and we set two priorities. And if folks did not meet those priorities, we did not fund them. First one was career education. The second was K-3 reading. And it really helped take, again, a pretty significant amount of resources and a pretty high touch in terms of folks impacting children each day. And we're able to align those dollars to some of our biggest priorities. Piece was really, really exciting in the career education fund was to see the creativity that folks had specifically in middle school, of folks wanting to do robotics, IT, computer science, coding, things like that, in a space that would have been in a very different place if we had not prioritized that. So that was really exciting to see the creative solutions that folks have. And again, most of those grants go to our highest need communities. And so it was really excited to be able to see, again, children who may not otherwise have been exposed to some of these types of opportunities, being able to take that robotics and engineering course or the computer science course. Second one, and this is the one that probably has the biggest, we're not approved to do this yet asterisk. So if folks are intrigued by this, I think we should probably reconnect in 6 or 8 weeks about this to figure out where we are. But we have proposed a soft competitive application. So if your natural question is, what in the world is a soft competitive application? It is essentially giving each district access to competitively apply for their entitlement allocation. And if they fail to align their proposal to the priorities that we've established, and career education would be one of the clearest, is that folks would not be funded. So if folks came in with kind of a weak, somewhat undefined plan that's not supported by evidence, we would not fund it. What we want to fund with this are folks who are leveraging opportunities that we've developed, and say through Prepare Rhode Island and New Skills for Youth and some of our other work, and using these limited resources to be able to help accomplish those goals and ultimately strengthen the school and be able to make sure that as we transition to this new expectation in terms of accountability, that folks are leveraging these dollars, again, whether it be career awareness and exploration at elementary, middle school, or whether it be helping students develop experience and expertise in high school, is we want folks to use these dollars for this. So this is going to be one of the priorities. Again, huge, huge, huge asterisks. We're not approved yet. And the question we got back was, how in the world are you going to do this? So we've got to work through some of that, but I think it's a really exciting opportunity and kind of a neat construct for folks to think about in terms of the federal dollars, where I think we've all experienced when folks view funding as an entitlement. You get a very different and, let's just say, less inspiring set of solutions than if folks know if they do not develop a bold and ambitious plan, that they will not get the dollars. The next one I think is important for us to talk to you is we're really doing a lot of work in the district support space. We can sit in Providence and come up with what we think are the best set of solutions for how folks should use their ESSA dollars and the goals that we think matter. If our schools and districts don't agree with us and our teachers and families don't feel the same way, the work is not going to have a big impact. So we're doing some work in a bunch of different spaces to help support our school and district leaders in communicating the importance of this work. So the first piece is we've developed, and we're in the process of developing a district planning guide that's focused around the agency priorities, and the career readiness work is one of the biggest priorities, is really describing whether it be Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, IDEA, and Perkins, and really every single funding source that we give to a school or district. How can you align those dollars to support those priorities? So, for example, in the career ed space, Most folks wouldn't think of ways of how you can really leverage, a Title I. I think most folks would think is doable. But how can you really leverage Title II to do teacher PD related to building out pathways and getting a Rhode-approved CTE program? What is work in Title III that can help you develop systems and structures to be able to make sure that language isn't a barrier for a child to be able to get in a high-quality career education program? And then, for the biggest one that I think we're most excited to tackle is really how can you align IDEA and the really significant amount of funding and resources that are out there to be able to make sure that we're really thoughtfully using the full time that a student with an IEP can be in high school till they're 22 in most states, and make sure that those students are truly supported to success, not just getting a credit-based diploma, but really helping that student make sure that they possess the skills to be able to be successful at the next level. So we're going to be publishing that later this spring, and will really help, hopefully help folks better understand how those dollars can be leveraged. We're going to do some work which is always controversial with our lawyers, but we're going to do allowable cost rubrics. And the idea is really just kind of a cheat sheet, very, very simple grid of kind of is it allowable to use some of those federal dollars for certain types of activities. And so really showing folks, again, if you want to do teacher PD or if you have a shortage in CTE teachers, you use your Title II dollars to do that. But we want to put that on paper so superintendents, chief academic officers, CTE directors, and others can bring those into budget and planning conversations. We also want to do a lot of work to leverage school report cards. I feel like school report cards is one of those things that gets everything thrown on it and is supposed to be the panacea. But what we want to do with it is really try to give better long-term outcome information and the information that matters most to students and parents, and show them how children are doing in our schools and in our CTE programs after they graduate high school. My guess is for most of our parents and most of our teachers is if they were to find out that the average wage for a Rhode Island high school graduate the year after they graduate high school, if they don't go to college, is $8,000, so it's going to be surprised. And that's going to be very powerful for folks to see. And it's going to force schools and districts to think differently about how they support students as they transition to work. We've done it historically, and most states have, where folks track very publicly and show which kids are going to college. There's a lot of thoughtful work and conversations about placing children into college. We should have those same thoughtful conversations about helping students get jobs. And so we want to be able to get that information out there. We also want to make sure we include a variety of factors, and we're not going to put a summative evaluation on it. There may be a child who wants to work. There may be a child who wants to go to college. We're not going to put that information out there, but we're going to put out the wage data. We're going to put out post-secondary credits earned that first year after they graduate, so folks can really look and say, hey, this is the right program for me, or this is not the right program for me and my family. So, and then, the piece that's been a really big recurring theme for us is that our educators want to support this work, and I think folks really want to make sure that they're able to support students, but folks have not thought about, how to really incorporate this into what they're doing. And so we've really tried to focus on how do we help give folks the tools to be able to have these conversations. The next step for us as we move forward with the work is just continue to stress the importance of career education. I think the more and more we talk about it, the more and more people understand why this work is so important. Again, if folks realize the minority of children who graduate high school and go into college actually graduate college in 4 or 6 years, folks will understand that our kids truly need to be able to graduate high school with the ability to secure family sustaining employment and also be able to do college level work. We need to be really, really transparent and open about student outcomes. We need to show what our kids are doing, both in terms of completing programs. So we need to have conversations about what kids are doing after they leave the program, which is really the success metric we need to get into. I want to, at some point, and I'll throw this out in the universe so this collective group can help figure it out, but I'd love to figure out at some point in time, how do we develop essentially like a launch index of like students are able to support themselves and pay their own rent and move out after high school. again, because that's what parents are ultimately going to be concerned about at the end of the day, is that their child's going to be able to support themselves once they graduate and move on. We have done a lot of work to help strengthen industry partnerships. I didn't talk about it a lot, but we have completely redone all of our CTE program standards, and we have done that by engaging business and having business work with us to be able to make sure that the level of preparation for our programs is one that will help kids walk across the stage and into a family-sustaining job in Rhode Island. Before we started that work about 2 years ago, our programs were not aligned to the needs of our employers. And so we'd be in a meeting with an employer, whether it be IT, whether it be construction, whether it be welding and marine trades. And folks would say, we literally have thousands of jobs, but none of your programs are preparing kids. And once we really dove deep into that, we realized our programs weren't aligned to industry needs and we needed to develop a long-term structure. And we have done that, and it's been an amazing tool to get business really engaged in what's happening in our schools. And then the last piece is just keep having fun. This work is some of the most redeeming and enjoyable work that I've been a part of. I know I'm sure Laura feels the same way. But being able to talk to a student or a parent or a teacher who's able to open up opportunity and be able to support themselves, support their family after they graduate is truly a rewarding thing. And knowing that you can help reshape the trajectory of a student and create opportunities that will help uplift future generations of of families is really a powerful thing. And so, I mean, this work is a fun strand of work. And the other piece, too, for us, and I think this is the same in most states right now, and this is the needs of industry and business are really matching up with what students and parents want for their children. And so this is one of those spaces for us. We have a lot of controversial work, but this work has really been some of the most redeeming, most rewarding. And we've seen a huge increase in CTE programs. Looks like we will have gone from about 120 programs about 3.5, 4 years ago to potentially as many as 200 this upcoming fall. And that program growth, those new 80 programs, almost entirely in high growth, high wage jobs as defined by labor market information. So it's been really a fun strand of work, but also amazing to think about the opportunities that have been created for our children and again, the long-term impact that's going to have. So thank you very much for letting me talk through that. Again, it's really exciting to be able to share the story and look forward to working with folks and talking with folks about this moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing about your work in Rhode Island. So we've got a few minutes left in our hour together to go over some questions. We've received a few through over the course of the presentation, but just as a reminder, if you do have any questions you would like to ask any of the panelists today, please enter those in the Q&A box. And I will note before we go on, we've had a couple questions about the slides and whether or not they would be available. We will be posting these within 24 hours on our website at careertech.org/webinars, and you'll be able to download a copy of the slides there.
Great. So our first question is going to be for Laura and Steve, probably both of you. So school counselors, as we know, work in not just academic and social emotional counseling, but they also work in college and career readiness for all students. So how are you guys leveraging the work that school counselors are already doing or could be doing to support CTE and ESSA plans?
Laura, you want to go first?
Yeah, Laura, you might be on mute if you're talking.
Sure. So I think that's one of the things that we have come to recognize pretty quickly is that school counselors have quite a bit on their plate, and we're asking them really to be a jack of all trades. Especially in South Dakota, they can be our test administrators. They have to deal with emotional crises, and they have lunchroom duty, and on top of all that, we're asking them to help 120 seniors figure out what they're doing next with their life. And so one of the pieces that we're just putting into place is taking some of that off of their plate and providing FTE to focus on the career advising part so that we can figure out how do we make that work for them once our state FTE go away. How can we help school districts figure out how to balance it better? I don't think that we have any of the right answers right now, but we recognize that there's a problem there, and so we're working on piloting solutions for how do we help bring that balance better into our school districts.
I think we similarly, you know, have really looked to this work as an area for us to really invest and do more work for our counselors. We had done a scan before we did our New Skills for Youth plan. We had not done any type of state-level counselor training at the state level in more than a decade, and I believe it was at least 25 years since there was anything related to career education. So we'd been minimally involved, and it was, I think, very powerful. I believe it came from Advanced CTE, but it's either Advanced CTE or ESG. Of the school counselor, it was I believe it was the second most trusted source of information on career education. And for folks who haven't seen that study, it was really powerful. Teachers were number one. I believe counselors were number two. Mentors, I think, were 3 or 4, and then teachers were about 96%. I think the counselors were about 90, 92. And then SEAs were, I believe, second last with, I want to say it was like 58%. And then last was the superintendent of the local school system. And it's not to say that we all don't play important roles in supporting that work in those conversations, but it really brought me back to the high school experience that, many of us had. Which that counselor was a person that you were interfacing with and having conversations about. We, as a state, have a mandate that every child have an individual learning plan that helps walk them through kind of career preparation and thinking about their future. So we've really invested some time where we had a work group last year that helped come up with some recommendations around that. And then we also did a RFP to help folks be able to purchase systems that help support that. And then we have through our Prepare Rhode Island work, we have a counselor fellow who's helping us develop some tools and resources. But I think the counselor piece is one that is probably one of the most underappreciated. But like Laura said, most of them are doing lunch duty. They're dealing with whatever crazy things happen in the school each day. And there's a lot that we need to do centrally. In terms of providing resources, tools, helping incubate intermediaries to help them find jobs for kids, because it's a really difficult task, especially if you're in a small high school, to be able to help support students at the level of personalization that we all know each child is.
I don't, like we might have lost Steve, but that's okay because I'm going to queue up our last question since we just have a couple of minutes left. So we've been focusing on ESSA in this webinar, but we have a question wondering about how all of this work interacts with the fact that new WIOA plans are due later this year, that Perkins reauthorization is on the horizon, as well as the Higher Education Act, which was recently brought into the House. So we're curious about how all of those things interact with each other, if they interact with each other, how that might affect the plan. So Laura, do you want to kick us off? And then Ryan, I'd also love your thoughts from the more national level.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think we learned a lot of lessons in developing our ESSA state plan that positions us really well for when the rest of these things come down the pike at us. So we've built those strong collaboration networks. We've figured out how to do really robust stakeholder engagement, and we've really learned how to develop meaningful plans that work for South Dakota and to push the boundaries perhaps back on what the feds require and really take a hard look at what makes sense for us. So I think we can really take that ESSA experience that was a really successful, positive experience for South Dakota and apply that as we look forward to perhaps some of these other authorizations.
I think that's right on target. I think the only other thing I would add is that I do believe there's going to be opportunity if and when Perkins and HEA move forward, and certainly through the WIOA plans, to begin to align metrics that states have put in place to really focus in on how are we getting students, both college and career ready, and making sure that that finds its way into all of those plans, and that there are true accountability measures across the board, so that educators have a coherent set of focus points and that there's not sort of disparate expectations across the board just because there's different funding streams. At the end of the day, this is all about making sure kids have pathways that get them into higher education and training that ultimately allow them to get jobs with family-sustaining wages. And the more that we can stop working in silos and sort of provide coherence across systems to push towards that, I think the better off everyone will be.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. Just to wrap up, and I want to thank all of our panelists too for joining us this afternoon. We've really appreciated hearing from you and hearing about your perspectives from your states and from reviewing all of the state plans. Just as some final takeaways, I want to include a link here to the report that Ryan and I mentioned. You can download that on our website, careertech.org. We will also have the webinar and slides available online at careertech.org/webinar after the presentation. And I want to say, once we close the webinar, you'll receive a survey, and we encourage you to fill that out. That's helpful for us to get feedback on how the presentation went. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us this afternoon. We've appreciated having you all, and hope you all have a great day.